We're going to begin with the recitation of the Quran, just to remind us about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words, and that's how we're going to be starting this event, inshallah. I will be reciting some ayat, or some verses from chapter number 31, Surah Luqman. And these verses are going to be talking about the advice that Luqman gave to his son. And Luqman, the scholars differ about who he was. Some say that he was a prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about him as a wise person. So inshallah, I will begin with the Arabic and then translate it in English. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولقد آتينا لقمان الحكمة أن اشكر لله ومن يشكر فإنما يشكر لنفسه ومن كفر فإن الله غني حميد وإذ قال لقمان لابنه وهو يعظه يا بني لا تشرك بالله إن الشرك لظلم عظيم ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه حملته أمه وهنا على وهن وفصاله في عامين أن اشكر لي ولوالديك إلي المصير وإن جاهداك على أن تشرك بي ما ليس لك به علم فلا تطعهما وصاحبهما في الدنيا معروفا واتبع سبيل من أناب إلي ثم إلي مرجعكم فأنبئكم بما كنتم تعملون يا بني إنها إن تك مثقال حبة من خردل فتكن في صخرة أو في السماوات أو في الأرض يأت بها الله إن الله لطيف خبير يا بني أقم الصلاة وأمر بالمعروف وانه عن المنكر واصبر على ما أصابك إن ذلك من عزم الأمور ولا تصعر خدك للناس ولا تمش في الأرض مرحا إن الله لا يحب كل مختال فخور واقصد في مشيك واغضض من صوتك إن أنكر الأصوات لصوت الحمير. So in these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by talking about Luqman, mentioning that, and we have certainly given, we referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have certainly given Luqman wisdom and said, be grateful to Allah. And whoever is grateful for the benefit of himself. And whoever denies Allah's favor, then indeed Allah is free of need and praiseworthy. And mention, O Muhammad, when Luqman said to his son while he was instructing him. So now Luqman begins his advice to his son. He begins by saying, O my son, do not associate anything with Allah. Indeed, associating with him is a great injustice. So the first advice that he gives him is that he's already starting off with the fact that associating anything with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one of the greatest atrocities someone can commit. And this is the foundation of his advice that he begins with. Before telling him anything else is his belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have enjoined upon man care for his parents. his mother carried him, increasing her in weakness upon weakness, and his weaning is in 2 years. Be grateful to me and to your parents, and to me is the final destination. But if they endeavor to make you associate with me that of which you have no knowledge, do not obey them, but accompany them in this world with appropriate kindness, and follow the way of those who turn back to me in repentance. Then to me will be your return, and I will inform you about what you used to do. And so now Luqman is giving advice to his son about the importance of parents, and how after having your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understanding that you're not allowed to associate anything with Him, the advice he gives them is having kindness towards your parents, regardless of what they tell you to do or how they act towards you, with the exception of them nullifying the first advice that Luqman gave, which was to associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Luqman said, "O my son, indeed if wrong should be the weight of a mustard seed and should be within a rock or anywhere in the heaven or in the earth, Allah will bring it forth. Indeed, Allah is subtle and acquainted. O my son, establish prayer, enjoin what is right, forbid what is wrong, and be patient over what befalls you. Indeed, all that is of the matters requiring determination." So now he's giving his son the importance of our prayer that we have 5 times a day, and that we need to establish and make sure that we're keeping up with our daily prayers. And the importance of when you see something that is good, that you encourage that good and that you enjoin and be part of that good, and that when you see something evil, you do everything in your power to stop what that evil action is. And do not turn your cheek in contempt toward people, and do not walk through the earth exultantly. Indeed, Allah does not like everyone self-deluded and boastful, essentially warning his son from being arrogant and acting like he is something, when in reality all we are the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And be moderate in your pace and lower your voice. Indeed, the most disagreeable of sounds is the voice of donkeys. And indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken the truth. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Jazakallah khair for coming, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Welcome to the UC Davis Muslim Student Association's very first debate. And we are very excited to be holding it today. And we're very honored that you all took the time on a weekday to come out and listen to this beautiful debate. We're extremely excited to be hosting these 2 amazing debaters who are very kind, very knowledgeable, and have spared their time in the middle of the week to come and speak to us. And with that, they're going to be debating the concept of the existence of God. And before I give them a proper, well-due introduction, I will be passing off the microphone to Ali Dawa, who will be talking about salam. It's on. And just also speak into it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I start, I want to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, the most just. All praises, glory and gratitude belong to Him for everything that we do. Salam stands for sharing affection, love and mercy. And that's what we're here to do, inshallah. Specifically at the time of age that we live, where hate is being spread by the label given freedom of speech. And this sometimes comes at the cost of innocent people dying. And we saw that at Christchurch, we saw that in London, where we're from, innocent people getting killed, Muslim or non-Muslim. And we want to put an end to this. And one of our objectives is to deconstruct false narratives and reconstruct purer minds. And that's our main objective. And I just want to thank every single one of you guys for coming. You can check our website, salam.org.uk. Inshallah, we're planning on setting up a team in California. This is a beautiful country. We absolutely loved it. The food, is it the macarons? Yeah, raspberry flavor. Absolutely amazing. And I want to thank Brother Ali and the team. Every time I crave it, they get it from me. So inshallah, it'll be a successful debate, inshallah. And we want to thank, I'm not going to say uncle, because he looks quite young, mashallah. Brother Edward, yes, for coming, and yeah, inshallah. And Mohammed Hijab, we want to thank him, and we want to thank our teachers who have supported us along the way, inshallah. Inshallah, it will be a successful debate, and all praises belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much for that. Jazakallah khair. So first we'll be introducing Brother Mohammed Hijab. Mohammed Hijab is a debater and public speaker who engages in discussions and polemics on a wide variety of topics, including religion, politics, and society. He completed a politics degree and a master's in history from Queen Mary University. He has taught and instructed courses on humanities and languages in many contexts. He has numerous ijazas in some Islamic sciences and has studied in numerous Islamic seminaries, including the Shinqiti Institute, which employs a traditional Mauritian style of teaching the sacred sciences. Edward, Eddie, Tabash is a constitutional lawyer in the Los Angeles area. He graduated from UCLA in 1973, magna cum laude, with a bachelor's degree in political science. He graduated from Loyola Law School of Los Angeles in 1973. He is the son of an Orthodox rabbi from Lithuania and an Auschwitz surviving mother from Hungary. After decades of spiritual reflection and seeking, he has determined that the universe is natural, with no supernatural being or beings, no god or gods, involved in the creation or perpetuation of our existence. He chairs the board of directors of the Center of Inquiry Transnational, a worldwide organization of secular humanists and scientific skeptics. He is also known for his legal work in separation of church and state cases, in which we seek to preserve the equality before the law of both believers and non-believers. He promotes a secular society based in science, reason, and inquiry. Maintaining strong conviction in this, he's an integral leader to several associations which exist to separate church and state. A part of his work in separation of church and state has specifically been in opposing Trump's Muslims ban. And mashallah, they're both extremely qualified, and we're very, very excited to have them both in this debate. And for this reason, we would like to also request a certain level of boundaries and guidelines for the event, inshallah, to make sure that it goes as smooth as possible for both of our speakers. And that we ask that everyone be as respectful as possible to both of our speakers by doing a number of few things. So we would like everyone to please, if possible, please do not shout, heckle, boo, scream, cause any form of ruckus against either speakers in order to respect their time, their knowledge, and everything that they're doing for us today. If people are causing issues, unfortunately, we will have to have security escort you out in respect for both of our speakers. Also, another request that we have is that if you would like to clap, please feel free to, but only after the speaker is completed with what they're saying, simply because there is a time frame that each of them has to be able to get their points across, and we do not want to disadvantage either speaker by limiting the other speaker's amount of time through clapping and waiting for people to stop talking. And with that said, please, Jazakallah khair, thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it. And then I will be passing off the microphone to our moderator, which is Adnan Perwez.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. As Hasna mentioned, I will be moderating the debate. We will start off with opening statements. Each speaker will have 20 minutes to give theirs, and we will begin with Brother Mohammed Hijab.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I want to thank every single one of you for coming down here. I want to thank the university, and of course, I want to thank Eddie Tabash, who's a really prolific, formidable opponent, and a very experienced atheist opponent for many years. And so I'm very happy that all of you are here today. To proceed, there's no doubt that there is existence. There is no doubt that there is existence. Existence is divided into two things: possible existence and necessary existence. Possible existence is existence that otherwise doesn't need to exist. And it's existence that could be arranged in any other way. It's existence which is dependent. For example, I'm wearing a blue blazer. This is a possible existence. It doesn't have to exist. It could be arranged in another way, and it's dependent upon materials that were created, used to create it. Necessary existence, on the other hand, is existence which couldn't be any other way. Existence which could not be any other way, is independent, self-sufficient, and could not be out of existence. Now, the main argument today is this. There cannot be a world with only possible existences. That is the main argument. There cannot be a world with only possible existences. Why? Because if there was only possible existences, I'm going to be using the board a little bit. If there's only possible existences, you would have dependent things depending upon other dependent things. Now this can be reasoned metaphysically, ontologically, and cosmologically. For example, we have a mathematical set. It's like a series, yes? And you have things within that. Dependent 1, dependent 2, dependent 3. If this series existed by itself, it would require something outside of it, an independent thing, in order for that series to exist. Now, what if we say if this is an infinite series? It's not really a good sign, but let's say if it was an infinite series. We'll get to that in what follows. Now, let's use a cosmological example. We have a tree. There's very beautiful trees here, by the way, in California. Like a cherry tree. I saw a cherry tree. Very beautiful. That tree requires the sun to photosynthesize in order to exist. I think it's fair to say if the tree didn't exist, or if the sun didn't exist, the tree would not exist. It's fair to say this, yes? So long as the sun is required, or so long as the tree exists, the sun will exist. Even if that was for an infinite amount of time. Now the sun itself is part of its own order. And it's part of its own set. Now it requires other things in order to exist. At the end of this, what is required, once again, is an independent thing. This independent thing can only be one. Wait a minute. Why is that? Because if there was more than one necessary existence, it wouldn't be a necessary existence, because it could be conceived that it can be arranged in another way. And you can't have two things which are independent, because which one is dependent on which? Therefore, whether you conceptualize this ontologically, cosmologically, on materialism, dualism, idealism, you must conclude that what is required in order for any existence to exist is an independent thing. That is one. That is always in existence. Why? Because if it wasn't in existence, if it could be conceived that this thing is not in existence, it wouldn't be necessary. So it has to be eternal. And it cannot be made up of parts. Why? Because anything which is a compound is generated. Anything that's made up of parts is dependent on those parts. That's point number one. And point number two, if it was a possible existence, if it's made up of parts, you can imagine those parts being arranged in a different way. Therefore, it falls into the category of possible existence. To summarize, you require an independent thing outside of the series of dependent things in order for any existence to exist. This thing must be one. It cannot have parts. It must be immaterial, incorporeal. What else must it be? It must be eternal. Now this is what the Quran says in its basic definition of God. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say He is God, one and only. Allahu Samad. The one who's independent, self-sufficient. Everything depends upon Him, and He depends upon nothing. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. He begets not, nor is He begotten. He is the eternal one, pre-eternal, post-eternal. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. And there is nothing like Him. He's immaterial. He's not composed of parts. He's incorporeal. So you see, this is the argument. If this argument is cracked, I have lost the debate. This is my main argument. Everything goes back to this argument, which goes back to the basic definition of God. What must be presented is a formulation, whether it's a cosmological one or an ontological one, which shows us how it's possible that only possible existences can exist without the independent. If that's done, I'm ready to be an atheist today. Now, the Quran says in chapter 52, verse 35, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أم هم الخالقون أم خلقوا السماوات والأرض بل لا يوقنون. Were they created from nothing? Or were they themselves the creators of themselves? Did they create the heavens and the earth? Certainly they have no certainty. Saying that the atheistic position is one of mere speculation. You can never achieve certainty with atheism. Why? Because in this logical disjunction you have four options. Either the universe came from nothing, which is impossible, ontologically, mathematically, and cosmologically. It's not possible. No one has argued this really. It's a weak argument. I don't think my interlocutor with his experience will go there. He's very prominent and very experienced. You won't go there. And, or, is it eternal? Can it be eternal? Well, let's say it is. Wait a minute, what did you say? Did you concede to that? Yes, no problem. Even if it was eternal for the sake of argument, is it dependent or independent? You still have the problem here. But my interlocutor is a naturalist, so he believes in the beginning of the universe. So that's not a problem for us. What other option do we have? Is it self-created? Like my friend Hamza Zulsus says, is it possible for something to exist and not exist at the same time? He gives the example of a mother giving birth to herself. Is that possible? No, it's not possible. Come on. It's not possible. So the other thing is, it was put into existence by something which had the ability to do so. Now, the question is, what are the attributes of that thing which had the ability to put the universe into existence? How do we reason this? By inference, we say, well, if it had the ability to put the universe into existence, it must have power, because that is required for that kind of thing. It must have creative capacity. It must have knowledge. It must have knowledge. So you see, we start to have a formulation. A question now we have to ask is, why is the universe one way and not another way? It's conceivable, for example, you see you have celestial spheres in the universe. They're rotating in one direction. We can conceive and imagine of the possibility of all of the celestial spheres in the universe going the other way, for example. We can imagine that. So why is the universe one way rather than another way? I will tell you that the only rational explanation for that is that there is an external particularizer of the universe. Say that one more time. That there must be an external particularizer of the universe to choose between different options, possible options, because then you have no explanation for why the universe is one way rather than another way. You have to have an external sorting agent. You have to have an external what? Sorting agent that decides X rather than Y. Otherwise, the question will be, to the atheist, how can you prove on naturalism, or how can you explain on naturalism, that the universe is one way rather than another way? It's a very straightforward question. Now, here's the thing. If we know that there is an external sorting agent, this implies will of this agent. And if there was more than one will, there would be a chaotic universe. As the Quran says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا فسبحان الله رب العرش عما يصفون. If there was more than one of them, the universe would have been corrupted. The heavens and the earth would have been corrupted. Chapter 21, verse 22. How? Because if there's more than one will, ultimately, which one is steering the ship? There would be chaotic order. The Quran also says, لَعَلَى بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ in chapter 23, verse 91. If there was more than one Almighty, they would have outstripped one another, attempted to outstrip one another for power. So in other words, you can't have more than one of those things for those reasons as well. And this brings me to my third point, which is the argument of the physical coherence of the universe, which is a Quranic argument. Because today I'm just going to be sticking with the Quran. The Quran says, الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. That, chapter 67, verse 3. Look at the universe. Look up in the sky. Look at the sky. Look at the coherence of the universe. Do you see any inconsistencies? Look again. The Quran says, wait a minute. Look again. Let me look. Let me see. Is there any inconsistencies? Now, I thought about this verse. And this verse is telling us that there is a uniformity of nature, a consistency of nature, a coherence of nature. The fact that the universe is uniform and coherent is not known by science. It's presupposed by science. Wait a minute, what did you say? Let me say it one more time. If you look, for example, at any introductory guide to the scientific method, like Hugh Gao, he wrote the illustrated guide to the scientific method. He said that the fact that you have rationalizable actors that can see the universe and see its consistency means that there's a presupposition of science. And what is that presupposition? That science is uniform. That the universe is uniform. It's rationalizable. Albert Einstein said in his letters to Solvin, he said the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. So I'm not making a fine-tuning argument today because we've heard enough of that. Every atheist and every non-atheist has heard this fine-tuning argument. What's this fine-tuning argument? The argument is, look at the constants of nature. Yes? You have these constants which are in a Goldilocks zone of life permitting range. If they were any way this way or that way, they would not, the universe would not exist, and life would not be possible in the universe. Like Martin Rees wrote just 6 numbers, and he says n, which is capital N, a number, talking about, the natural forces. He says it's a billion, 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 billion. And had any zeros been taken away, yes, then that would have been, the universe would have been completely different. E is another letter that he talks about, the conversion of hydrogen into helium. He says that this conversion is 0.007. Had it been 0.006 or 0.008, we would not exist. This is exactly what he writes. It's not what I'm writing. I'm not a cosmologist. Right? That's what he writes. That's an argument from probability. That's an interesting argument. I think the interesting thing is that many people, theists and non-atheists, accept the fine-tuning of the universe. Stephen Hawking accepted it. Richard Dawkins accepted it. So it's not really an area of controversy. My argument is about the uniformity of nature, the coherence of nature, which is presupposed by the universe, by the scientific method. The question is, therefore, on naturalism, how can you account for the coherence of the universe? You can't say, well, the universe just is, like Bertrand Russell said, because that is a circular argument, frankly. It's a cop-out. I'm asking for an external explanation. We're rational people. We should be able to explain. If naturalism has the ability to give us these answers, then surely we should be entitled to such answers. Now, I've got 5 minutes left, and I've made my arguments. To reiterate, my main argument today is the argument from contingency. And it's not one that Leibniz formulated. It's a different kind of argument from contingency that many Western people are not familiar with. It's from our tradition. And frankly, the main question is this. The question is, how can you explain a world, either ontologically or cosmologically, naturally, that only has possible existences? That's the question. If you can prove it, you've cracked the argument. Now, I know I've been watching his videos. He's an incredible speaker. And because he's a lawyer, he's got that charisma that when he starts speaking, I might have to run away, actually. Incredible speaker. But I know, I have a feeling of what he's going to talk about, and I think it's going to be the problem of evil. Right? Now, Epicurus an old Hellenistic philosopher. He had the logical form of the problem of evil. And the logical form went as follows, that if God is omnipotent and all good, then if he's omnipotent, why does he not stop the evil? If he's all good, then how comes evil exists? The answer to that question is as follows. I'm going to give it to you right now. God is not just those two things, he's also all-wise. So, in order for the problem of evil, from an Islamic traditionalist perspective, to be unlocked or to make sense from a logical perspective, you have to show logically, or naturalistically, or cosmologically, or mathematically, or inductively, or abductively, any way possible. How evil, the existence of evil, contradicts the divine wisdom. That's how it goes. We don't believe in a God with three attributes, goodness, or two attributes, and omnipotence only. That's not the God we believe in. So we have to show, otherwise it's an emotional argument. Now, the other thing he talks about is the divine hidedness. Why is God hidden from us? Now, we believe in the fitrah as Muslims. The immediate knowledge of God, the intuitive knowledge of God. And by the way, this is a Muslim-specific belief. We believe that we are born believing in God. We have the immediate knowledge of God. And that society strays us away from that knowledge of God. So the Quran, for instance, or the prophets come to reinforce what we already knew primordially, if you like. Primordially, from a psycho-spiritual perspective. So God is not hiding. In fact, he's reminding us. And the Quran says, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. If an atheist dies as an atheist, and according to us, if he dies as an atheist, he's not heard the message of Islam, he does not go to hell straight away. We can't say this. It's not our belief. So God is not hiding according to us. So these are the two things I'm anticipating he's going to be raising up. So I'm preempting it. And finally, what I want to say, and we'll talk about this, by the way, the fitrah, the immediate knowledge of God, because there is empirical evidence of that. By the way, Justin Barrett has many interesting books on this. He says that there is a divine receptivity to God. And he done, studies with children cross-culturally and found that children naturally believe in God. So atheism on this idea is a social construct. Atheism is a cultural construct. So finally, I want to say that the Quran promises us in chapter number 41 that Allah will show us all the way. In other words, his signs. He says, سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. That we will certainly show them our signs in the horizons and in themselves, until it's made patently clear that this is the truth. I hope today we can be as sincere as possible and be open to this. And I hope now that we go back to that question of how there can be only possible existences. I leave it to Edward for the response. Thank you very much.
Is there some other mic I'm supposed to be? Okay. Good evening, everybody. I want to thank the Muslim Student Association for putting on this debate, and I want to thank Mohammed for debating me. I will respond to his arguments in my rebuttal, but I will now present my positive arguments for why it is more likely than not that the evidence in our physical universe clearly makes it so that a supernatural, conscious, personal being that is an all-good, all-knowing, and all-powerful deity, the standard issue God of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, does not exist. Argument one, the argument that from the way our world operates, it is much more likely that there is nothing beyond the physical. The evidence shows that it is much more likely that the universe is not impacted by any invisible realms or by intentional actions by immaterial beings. The history of scientific discovery has shown that whenever we attributed phenomena to paranormal creatures or gods, further examination showed such beings did not cause what was happening. We learned that lightning is not caused by an angry god or gods, diseases are not caused by evil spirits and by germs, and demonic possession has nothing to do with mental illness. As humanity has gone forward, natural explanations have always evicted previously believed supernatural ones. It has never been the other way around. There's no verifiable evidence of anything supernatural, which there should be if the supernatural existed. Since we have no background information of supernatural beings or events, there is a very low prior probability of them. This means that, for instance, if we were to use Bayes' probability theory, we would be predicting only natural explanations for phenomena. Though we have never seen a quark, we know that the category of subatomic particles do exist. Evidence for the existence of quarks has been steadily increasing. One indication of the soundness of the quark model is its success in predicting the outcome of high-energy collisions of an electron and positron. There are no such equivalent empirically verifiable indications of God's existence. So we cannot infer the supernatural from a mere observation of the natural. Number two, the argument from the non-occurrence of miracles. Claims of miracles have the initial problem of bearing witness against themselves, since by their very content they are violations of the laws of nature that are not supposed to be violated. All the supposed miracles that are claimed to verify God's intervention in human affairs allegedly took place in a pre-scientific era. Why don't we moderns have the same opportunity to observe these miracles today? No verifiable events in today's world correspond to the types of miracles that monotheistic religions claim happened in ancient times. Thus, the probability that a miracle happened, regardless of which religion makes the claim, will always be lower than the probability that a miracle has not occurred. Number three, the argument from the dependence of conscious minds on a physical body and brain. There is overwhelming evidence that conscious thought and awareness cannot occur without a functioning physical brain with operative cortical neurons and synapses. Believing in a disembodied superintelligence and in life after death creates a serious dilemma. If even Alzheimer's disease can destroy conscious awareness, how can that very same conscious awareness survive the destruction of the entire body and brain at death? This would entail believing that if certain portions of our physical brains are damaged, we lose the awareness contained in those portions. But if you destroy the entire brain by death, your awareness will somehow reappear fully intact in some immaterial form. Highly unlikely. If consciousness could survive independently of the brain, diseases, brain injuries, and anesthetics would not eclipse consciousness like they do. Since the evidence shows there is no conscious self-awareness or thought without a functional brain with operative cortical neurons and synapses, we cannot be expected to believe in any God that is supposed to have a disembodied thinking mind. Number four, the argument from evolution. Though many theists believe in evolution because of its sloppiness and trial and error features, evolution by natural selection is more likely if there is no God. More than 99% of all species that have ever existed are now extinct. This is wasteful. We have useless components in our bodies that indeed do more harm than good, like the appendix, known to most of us only when it's about to burst. Evolution by natural selection is established by the weight of the evidence. For instance, there is a 100% match of DNA sequences in the pseudogene region of beta globin that is proof that humans and gorillas had a common ancestor. Number five, as Muhammad predicted in his prophetic wisdom, the argument from evil, the evidential argument from evil. God can make whatever he wants happen and prevent anything he doesn't want from occurring. So why are there holocausts, extremely dangerous and violent people, horrible diseases, extreme poverty, and destructive natural disasters? If we humans need discipline, we could benefit from a military-style training camp, not a concentration camp. There was no benefit for my mother's having been in Auschwitz. Another example, malaria is a terrible disease. There's a gene, though, that provides an effective defense against malaria. It works by destroying any red corpuscles that have been occupied by any of the types of parasitic protozoans that cause malaria. But if one has inherited this gene from both parents, it also causes sickle cell anemia. Why did God have to set it up this way or allow it to work this way? To attempt to justify or explain the horrendous evil and suffering in the world, the theist must be able to show that God, even with unlimited power, could not have prevented an even greater evil, but for the horrible evil and suffering he actually created or allowed, or with unlimited power, God could not have brought about a very great good, but for the horrible evil and suffering God actually created or allowed. Here, the theist must also be able to show that the very great good that could not, but for this horrible evil and suffering take place, was indeed such a great good as to morally justify subjecting the victims to the agonizing pain they have to endure. If we take the concept of God's omnipotence seriously, this is a very high burden for a supposedly omnipotent being to meet. The argument, number 6, from divine hiddenness. A God that wants us to know that this God exists and wants a relationship with us would not withhold evidence of the divine existence and would understand just what evidence many of us would need in order to be able to believe. If God exists and created me, God knows my mind and knows that right now I couldn't believe in God, regardless how much I wanted to, just like I couldn't believe in space alien visitations to Earth because of the absence of any evidence showing these things to be true. God's not being forthcoming with the evidence that would enable me to believe that God exists, while knowing that I can't believe in the absence of such evidence is more consistent with God's non-existence than with the existence of a God that wants me to know him, her, or it. If your mother told you that your father, whom you've never met or spoken to, loves you very much and wants a father-child relationship with you, but just has been too busy to ever come to see you ever since you were born, let's say around your 18th birthday, you would probably conclude that your dad really doesn't want a relationship with you. We can actually see the reality of human fathers on a daily basis. So even if the dad in the above scenario is always absent, we can believe he exists. We don't have the same evidence that a God exists. So if we are told there is a God who loves us and wants relationship with us, but that God never provides us with direct evidence that it exists, when such an all-powerful God could easily provide that direct evidence, we are justified in doubting the existence of that God and doubting the desire of any such God to want a relationship with us. Divine hiddenness also furthers the argument from evil. If God exists, such a being would know that unanswered questions about why there is so much evil and suffering prevent many of us from believing in such a God. We have a right to expect that a perfectly good God would not allow such horrendous evil and suffering without morally sufficient reasons. If we are not told what those morally sufficient reasons are, then it is more probable that a perfectly good God that wants to be believed in and worshiped does not exist. 6.1, the argument from religious confusion, a subset of divine hiddenness. There's so much disagreement over which religion is true and even over which branch of a given religion is true. If God exists and wants us to know its will and follow divine decrees, we are justified in expecting that this deity would not allow so much confusion over who that God is, what that God wants us to believe in, and what that God wants us to do. The presence of such rampant confusion is more likely if a God that wants us to know its will does not exist. So Catholics believe that when the Pope speaks ex cathedra, he's infallible. Protestants reject the concept of a Pope. If only one of these is true, God should make clear to Christians which one it is. Sunni and Shiite Muslims began to disagree over whether Muhammad's successors should be chosen by qualifications alone or need to have direct bloodline to Muhammad. Shiites believe that the 12th Imam in the 10th century was taken into hiding by God in a process called occultation and will return at the end of time in a full messianic capacity to facilitate the final and full understanding of the Quran and the Prophet's message. Sunnis do not accept this. Now, even though the Sunnis and Shiites share the Quran, they have different versions of the Hadith, which are very important to Islamic interpretation of the deeds and traditions of the Prophet. So if one of these is true and the other is false, God should make clear to Muslims which one it is. Now, the other, also derived from divine hiddenness, argument from unreliable revelations and translations, from defects and errors in the Bible and the Quran. If God exists, we are justified in expecting that this God will provide us with a reliable revelation. If there are problems with the revelation, then it's more consistent with a God that is not perfect. Both the Bible and Quran talk clearly about male dominion over women. Genesis 3:16 says, "And thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee." Surah 4:34, Pickthall says, "Men are in charge of women because Allah hath made the one of them excel the other." Well, we modern humans have learned that there is no reason for men to be in charge of women because women are the intellectual and moral equals of men. So this itself shows that both the Bible and the Quran are incorrect insofar as they vest the man with more power over the woman than the woman is vested over the man. Also, both the Bible and the Quran talk about hell eternally for those who don't believe in the religion each revelation is promoting. Well, they can't both be true. It can't be true that you'll go to hell forever if you are not a Christian, and you'll go to hell forever if you're not a Muslim. So if in fact there is a God that bases our eternity on whether we choose Christianity or Islam, then that God should tell us which one and not let us make the honest and sincere mistake of picking the wrong one and falling through the trap door into eternal horror. So the very fact that God doesn't make this clear to us and give us a clear choice is more consistent with there not being a God that wants us to find the truth. Now, also, if Islam is true, those of us who do not speak Arabic and those of us who can't read the Quran in its original should be given a clear, unambiguous translation, which is the functional equivalent of Arabic, or God should have revealed the Quran in every major language. Mohammed Pickthall was one of the most prominent translators of the Quran into English in the 20th century, and in his translator's foreword, it's a direct quote, "The Quran cannot be translated. Every effort has been made to choose befitting language, but the result is not the glorious Quran. It can never take the place of the Quran in Arabic. But then, if God wants me to be a Muslim, God should provide me with the proper translation so I don't make any errors." Now, another argument from divine hiddenness, a subset, is the argument for moral confusion. So many people acting in good faith, even members of the same religion, disagree about what is right and what is wrong in a bewildering variety of situations. Both the Bible and the Quran condemn gay sex, but most of us know gay couples, and our reason and experience tell us that same-sex relationships are no worse than heterosexual relationships, just like our reason and experience tell us there's no reason for men to be in charge of women or rule over women, as opposed to women being in charge of men and ruling over men. So if either or both the Quran and the Bible were infallibly true and inerrant, they wouldn't say these things. Argument 7, argument from scale, or the argument from human insignificance. 68% of the universe is dark energy. 27% is dark matter. So a scant 5% of the universe is even conceptually accessible by us. Of that 5%, virtually all of it is comprised of empty space, which is instantly lethal to human beings. So 99.359 of the universe is basically off limits to humans. Our galaxy contains around 300 billion stars. Our galaxy is one of 100 billion galaxies in the observable universe, and we have no access to any of this. Mathematically, we are just 1 part in 100, followed by 39 zeros of the universe. There are 20 septillion planets in the universe. That's 20 followed by 24 zeros. Why would God need such a literally astronomical number of excess planets if we are the core of God's creation and concern? The universe is 13.7 billion years old. The Earth is 4.6 billion years old. We humans have been around for maybe 200,000 years. If we are at the center of creation and of God's concern, why did God wait 13.7 billion years for us to appear? An all-powerful engineer would not have needed to suffer this kind of inefficiency. Remember, we are speaking of a God that's supposed to be all-powerful. Argument number 8, the argument against the existence of a transcendent person. A person is by very definition a being who thinks and performs actions, and that in turn requires being in time. So how could God have deliberately created anything if there wasn't an environment of time and space in which to operate sequentially so A could cause B? If the theist says that God exists in and functions in some unknowable metaphysical time, for which of course there's no proof, then the theist is conceding that God is not completely transcendent, since God operates in some nebulous context which corresponds to time. A being that is outside space and time is not working within a framework in which anything can be caused by anything else. So we can see that the overwhelming weight of the evidence in our physical universe makes the predictive power of atheism much stronger than that of theism. We see, for instance, that the universe is not perfect. Most of it is lethal. We also see that within 5 billion years, the sun will burn out, which means the earth will seek to exist. I don't see much perfection in that. So probabilistically, taking the totality of the evidence, it's far more likely than not that we live in a natural, not a supernatural universe, and that an all-powerful, all-good, all-knowing, self-conscious God does not exist. Thank you.
Thank you so much for both of our speakers. The next section will be the rebuttal section. Each speaker will have 10 minutes to counter the other speaker's argument that was presented during the opening statement. We will begin with Mohammed Hijab and then Edward Tabash. So, Mohammed Hijab.
I'll begin when everyone is quiet. All right, so Edward made 8 points, 8 arguments. I'm going to respond to each and every single one of them. The first one, the verifiable evidence of something which is supernatural, which links to his second point, which is the non-evidence of miracles. I'm going to prove today that Edward believes in miracles. What did you say? Let me say again. Edward believes in miracles. What is a miracle? According to Edward and according to David Hume, it's a violation of the laws of nature. It's a violation of the laws of nature. What is a miracle? Something which goes outside the 5 senses, which can't be really detected by science. Because naturalism, according to the Oxford Concise Companion, or philosophy, is something which can only be seen by science. The Quran responds. It says, وَضَرَبَ لَنَا مَثَلًا وَنَسِيَ خَلْقَهُ قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قال يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم. He says they say to us, they say, he struck an example, and they say, who's going to raise the dead when it becomes dust? The one who gave it life the first time. Now let's think of this. Have we ever seen the transition from chemistry to biology? No. This is referred to as abiogenesis. Yes? When chemistry becomes biology. Every study of biology presupposes this. Because if there's no such thing as a movement from chemistry to biology, there cannot be biology. Therefore, the dead became the living. Have you seen that? No. Have you sensed that? No. Is it scientific? No. Do you believe in it? Yes. It's a miracle. Just like Jesus raising the dead, it's a miracle. Just like the day of resurrection, it's a miracle. So just as all of those things will happen, the Quran says you can believe in all of that. It's premised on the movement from a non-living chemistry to a biology. You believe in it. We all believe in miracles. If that is how it's defined, and that's how he defined it. Number 3, the dependence of conscious minds on the brain, which is a philosophical discussion, frankly. Raymond Tallis, who wrote a book called Aping Mankind, he's a neuroscientist. He asked the question, if consciousness is in the brain, where is it in the brain? What's the natural explanation for where consciousness is in the brain? Really, frankly, the idea that you can lose consciousness through anesthetic and then be not in a state of consciousness is refuted by dreams, the existence of dreams. I close my eyes, but I see. How can you explain dreams? This is the problem of hard consciousness, the hard problem of consciousness. You can't bypass the academics. This is something that philosophers have been talking about since time began. Number 4. That the argument from evolution doesn't contradict theism. But which evolution are we talking about? Darwinian evolution after the 1960s? One thing will refute this. The problem of induction. Science has the problem of theory-ladenness, of induction, of interpretation, all of these things. You can't say that it's definite, and he didn't say that, he was careful in his wording, he says most likely. But that could be reformulated. If new data is found, it could be reinterpreted. It has been reinterpreted. In fact, there's more likelihood that our evolutionary conceptions will change. So you can't really use this as an argument. The argument from evil. What is evil? Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. On naturalism, evil does not exist. It's a cultural construct. It's a social construct. Look at the works of Bertrand Russell, of Nietzsche, postmodernists. Even Richard Dawkins in The Blind Watchmaker, he says there's no such thing as good. There's no such thing as evil. It's all pitiless indifference. That's what he says. Why? Because on naturalism, you cannot put morality under a microscope. There's no way of ascertaining that there is any morals on naturalism. There is no objective morality. What evil are you talking about? But for the sake of argument, let's say, okay, fine, evil exists. But we said it's not incompatible with wisdom of God. The Quran says again, هو الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. He's the one who has created life and death to see which one of you is best in deeds. If there was no evil, there would be no test. If there would be no evil, there would be no free will. What's the point of life then? What is the purpose of this? كل نفس ذائقة الموت ونبلوكم بالشر والخير فتنة وإلينا ترجعون. Everyone is going to die. Quran says, wait a minute. Everyone's going to die. I'm going to die. Eddie's going to die. You're going to die. And we will test you with good and evil as a test. And then you'll come back to us. It's a test. Without evil, there is no test. Next, divine hiddenness. We've already covered this. The fitrah. We're all born with the predisposition of God. There is evidence for this. Paul Bloom, Justin Barrett, many people have already said, we have analyzed empirical evidence of children, what is their natural instinct? It's mentioned, Justin Barrett says, they have a natural receptivity. They have a natural receptivity to the divine, a non-anthropomorphic God, not Jesus. not Buddha. We have natural inclination to God. And then that's reinforced by the prophets. That's the Islamic narrative. The prophets came to remind us of what we already knew. It's a dhikr. The Quran is a reminder. Just like if you were separated from your parents or your mother, and then you're reunited with her, she is by natural instinct. And the same thing with God. So we talked about divine unreliable revelations. I agree with this point. There are unreliable revelations, but I would want to see how that is the case with the Quran. There was no argument there. Chapter 4, verse 34, it's a bad translation, man in charge of women. There's only one translation, I think, or two. It's men are maintainers and protectors of women. And frankly, if you didn't believe this, you wouldn't draft men to the army in America. Men protect women, and they have done so. It's not saying that they're better than them. The Quran and the Prophet said, إِنَّمَا النِّسَاءُ شِقَائِقُ الرِّجَالِ Men are equal to women. So, I mean, the Quran says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ عَمَلَ عَامِلٍ مِّنكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنثَىٰ بَعْضُكُم مِّن بَعْضٍ. That God does not let to waste any action of a man or a woman, both of you. But anyways, go back to the idea of natural selection. On natural selection, the patriarchy on feminism is justified. Because if men can dominate women, that's a natural thing. What's the problem on naturalism? How can you justify feminism, second-wave feminism, on naturalism? That's an impossibility. You can't do it. Why not third-wave feminism? Why not the works of Judith Butler? Why not queer theory? Why not LGBT? Why it has to be second-wave, equal, the Eurocentric understanding of equality? How is that naturalistic? I'd want to see how he mechanistically shows us that. Hell, eternity, well, both of us can't be, Muslims and Christians can't be both right. You're right about that. But that doesn't solve any issue, doesn't create any problem. The translation problem, only one way to understand the language. There's a translation problem with mathematics. Is mathematics false, therefore? It's a language. If a translatable thing, it becomes false because of its content, and it has to be translated, then mathematics is false. Moral confusion. I mean, yes, there's moral confusion, but just because there's controversy of something, it doesn't make it false. That's a fallacy. Argument from scale. He says 99.9% of the universe is not hospitable to human life. He's made the fine-tuning argument for me. And we're in the 0.01. So what is the possibility of that for real? I agree with you. A transcendent person. A transcendent person, he defines person in a certain way. He says, well, God controls time and space. Simple as that. I mean, it's not really an argument. And I think, I've got a minute left. Have I got 1 minute left? Well. You know, here's the thing, guys. Don't be swayed by the red herring. The red herring is a moral red herring. The Quran says this about men. Look, here's the thing. On naturalism, no one is born equal. Yes? Why? Because actually liberalism is an outgrowth of something which is called the state of nature. It's a fictitious mythological construct which John Locke and Thomas Hobbes wrote in their books. It's not scientific. We came out of the state of nature and we became what? We became connected socially, contractually into the state. So the whole of liberalism and human rights, by extension, is a myth. It's a liberal myth. Show me on naturalism how liberalism is true. How we're all born equal. In fact, I'm tall, you know, you're average height. We're all different. On naturalism, we're all different. Thank you very much.
Mohammed initially said that his main point tonight was the argument from contingency. The problem is to say that there must be a necessary being for everything that is contingent requires that the necessary contingent situation plays out in an environment with cause and effect. And yet Mohammed has always said that the universe had a beginning and there was nothing before, and that God created the universe out of nothing. Here is the problem. You cannot analogize from cause and effect and necessary and contingent beings from within time and space as opposed to the very coming into being of time and space in the first place. If, in fact, the Big Bang, as is most likely, nothing preceded it, there was no time and space, you can have no cause and effect, and we can't even speak of cause and effect because there was no environment for A to cause B. Now, with respect to the notion of a necessary and contingent being, there's a problem with the concept of a necessary being. The problem is that a necessary fact cannot explain a contingent fact without introducing a new contingent fact in need of explanation. Now, let's see why this is so. If a necessary fact cannot explain a contingent fact except by entailing it, because any fact entailed by a necessary fact must itself be necessary. However, the necessary fact does not entail the contingent fact, then the explanatory connection it has to the contingent fact must be a contingent one, which introduces a new contingent fact in need of explanation. And if the defender of the argument replies that this new contingent fact can also explain by the necessary fact, then the same reasoning will apply, introducing yet another new contingent fact in need of explanation, and so ad infinitum. But the whole reason for introducing necessary fact in the first place was to avoid an infinite regress of explanations. Now, Muhammad said that we cannot even call something evil unless we have a moral foundation, implying that objective moral values can only exist with a supernatural being. But he doesn't explain what the connection is. For instance, I've shown you in the Bible and the Quran where, though Muhammad resists it, men are supposed to be in charge of women. I've showed you in both the Bible and the Quran where people are sent to hell forever for not just choosing the right respective religion. To say that we are in no position to judge whether God's doing that is right or wrong totally eclipses human reason. And there's another problem with that. To say objective moral values depend on God, you have to ask, is something good just because God says it is? Then it's arbitrary, and even sending sincere people to hell forever for not believing in the right religion would be okay just because God said it. Or does God always tell us to do what is good, but the standard of the good is independent of God? Then it means that objective moral values exist without being created by God recognizes them. And you can't get out of it by saying, well, no, the good comes from God's perfect nature, because we don't see that perfect nature. Now, as far as the dependence of consciousness on the physical brain is concerned, nothing mental happens without anything physical happening. There's no thought or awareness that comes into the human brain without a physical event in the brain. This is very, very important. Again, if consciousness could exist apart from the brain, then diseases and anesthetics wouldn't eclipse consciousness. Now, he talks about the coherence of the universe, and he thinks the argument from scale is not a problem. But it certainly is if, as somebody who believes in the Quran, because he quotes the Quran a lot, he believes in a God for whom humans is central in concern, then why all these excess septillions of planets? Also, if in fact the universe is so perfectly put together, why will the star upon which we depend, the sun, burn out in a very short span of time, and then after that we will die because the earth will no longer have the sun, and there can't be life on earth without the sun. Also, with respect to the whole concept of naturalism, Muhammad can't just, like I saw in one of his tapes, he tried to say that we can infer the existence of God from the functioning of the universe, just like we can infer the existence of gravity from the way gravity operates. But you see, definitionally, gravity is how I drop something, it hits the floor or hits the table. but that doesn't show that there is a supernatural source behind it. In terms of the laws of nature, the constants and the fine-tuning, as far as that's concerned, well, the laws of physics as they appear cannot be violated, but if they are, and if you change one constant and the other, studies have shown you can still have life. For instance, there was a study that showed that you can eliminate the weak nuclear force, one of the four forces, and stars could still form. If stars could form and explode, becoming supernova, then planets could still come about. We've also seen that there is an argument from cosmic inflation, which has been demonstrated, the cosmic microwave background, and the way inflation works with quantum mechanics, that there could be a multiverse, numbers and numbers of individual universes, each with their own pockets of different physical laws. This hasn't been established by proof, but yet it is a better argument than theism because it has a basics in physics and it has natural laws that are explainable. The other thing that Mohammed has not yet addressed is he would have to admit that in 99% of all instances in human technological process, when science has looked for an answer, it has found a natural answer. So what would be those instances that differentiate the need for a natural answer to a supernatural one? In other words, if we look at a cell or a bacteria, the way it behaves, natural explanation. But we look at something else and our answer is only God did it. There's a world of difference between looking at the fact that planets revolve around the sun and that stars don't fall out of the sky except when they explode as supernova, and going outside right now and seeing the constellations saying, Eddie and Mohammed, you're both wrong, you better become Mormons. There's a world of difference between those two. That would be a supernatural event. Also, Mohammed has never been able to, and I don't blame him because no one can show how if in fact consciousness depends on a physical brain, how the greatest intelligence in the universe can exist and think and function without a physical brain. How can there be a God that doesn't have cortical neurons and synapses? How does God think when all the evidence shows that the occurrence of thought requires cortical neurons and synapses? And also, if God is outside of space and time, God cannot be a personal being, because by very definition, a personal being is defined as something within space and time that has limits. So again, naturalism prevails over supernaturalism by the weight of the evidence. And we can see that there has never been any verified supernatural occurrences, and we have seen no evidence of any mental process that can exist in a disembodied state. So the evidence to date makes it more likely than not the universe is natural, not supernatural, and there is no God. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of the debaters, both Brother Mohammed Hijab and Edward Tabash. So the next session would be the question and answer between them both. However, just because of the timing and because Maghrib